So today I wanted to talk about some of the differences between Guards of Atlantis 2 and its competition. The first point I want to focus on is how damage is handled. In many skirmish games, like for example Arena the Contest or the very new game Judgment Eternal Champions, the characters have many hit points and it's just a matter of bringing the hit points down to 0. So let's say for example that you roll for your attack and it's a critical hit. That should feel epic, but what it often means is that the hit points of your opponent now have been reduced from 20 to 14, right? So it just feels like a numbers game and it doesn't feel that impactful. Quite some time ago, there was a video game series called Samurai Showdown. And the concept of the game was that you should feel like you're in an actual sword fight. And all the attacks that would hit you from a blade of your opponent would deal massive damage. And some of the attacks even could kill you in one hit. And Guards of Atlantis 2 handles this in a very similar way. So that means that if you cannot block an attack, it will be fatal. So just like in a real weapon fight, you have to respect every possible attack from your opponent. And there is always tension in the air. And also because of this system, there is often the possibility for comebacks because somebody can die very easily if they are not careful. The second thing I wanted to talk about is the card system. And here we can compare Guards of Atlantis to, for example, Super Fantasy Brawl or Unmatched. Both are skirmish games that have a card-driven gameplay mechanic. So let's say we play Unmatched. The problem I have with this game is that I'm never sure what my opponent could have in hand. So you always have to gamble and hope that your opponent won't have the perfect answer to your attack in his or her hand. So you could play one of your most valuable attacks because you see your opponent only has 2 cards in his hands, but then he pulls out the perfect counter card and it feels like your whole action was a failure. Guards of Atlantis 2 handles this very differently. At the start of every round, every player will have the same 5 colors of cards in his hand. So there is red, gold, blue, green, and silver. So always these 5 cards. And all of these colors represent a certain mechanic or a certain rule. Red and gold are the only 2 attack options that every character has. So if during a round you see that your opponent has discarded his red and his gold card, you then know for sure that he just got rid of his only 2 attack options. Similarly, red and blue have the highest block values. So if your opponent has discarded these 2 cards, you are now sure that he is a very good target for one of your attacks. This means that in contrast to some of the other games in this field, if you have never played against a certain character, you still know that they have to follow the rule of the 5 colors of cards. But still, Guards of Atlantis 2 manages to give certain personality and character to each of the champions. Because even though you share the red and the gold card mechanics, your gold card will do something a little bit different than what your opponent does. Or your red card will be able to give you some movement before your attack, while your opponent maybe has an after combat effect. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is the movement and the positioning. In some skirmish games, movement can feel very simplistic. It's just a matter of crossing the distance, of walking towards your opponent and then standing next to each other and trading hits until somebody falls. But there are 2 games that handle movement and positioning really, really well. And those are God Tier and Guards of Atlantis 2. Because I feel in these 2 games, it is really impactful whether I move 1 or 2 hexes in a certain direction. Every single hex that I move feels like it can make a big difference. There are many moments where you even have to congratulate your opponents because you see that they moved in a very clever way so that you cannot push them anymore, for example, or they stand exactly close to 2 minions so they can get more minion kills during this round. The movement feels really strategically and tactically important. And of course, one of the biggest difference between Guards of Atlantis 2 and many other skirmish games is that it is team-based. So while in other games, yes, there is the possibility to play 2 versus 2, for example, but then you have to wait for every single player's turn until it's finally your move again. In Guards of Atlantis 2, however, everybody makes the decision of which card to play simultaneously. So everybody is involved at every moment of the game. So it now may feel like I'm talking down on these other games, but I really have to say that Guards 2 solved some of the problems that I had with many skirmish games. And in this video, I just wanted to highlight these differences in the gameplay mechanics that are done so cleverly here. So thank you very much for watching and for supporting the channel. It really means a lot to me. And I hope to see you in the next video.